Oh, his grandmother's
So we did some reading.
sister is married to the Eberhards.
I'm going to tell you just a little bit about some of that. Basically, this has tremendous history in it. So it's a little bit, started out by just in German period. Germany existed 100 AD. We're doing ceilings now for people from China, 1500 BC to 1000.
1500 BC.
Yeah.
BC.
Yes.
We've started to have Korean and Chinese names in our baptistry and history.
So anyway, but that's interesting. But anyway, the place of Germany, they put quite a history in there. In the 10th century, there were just a lot of different countries around. And then in 1488, they made an official German thing, but it was called the Holy Roman Empire of Germany.
Oh.
And the Pope was in charge at that point.
But governed by Rome.
Governed by
In
Rome.
1480?
And then came along in 1517, Martin Luther King came in northern Germany.
Not King.
Martin Luther.
Martin
Luther. And formed his Reformation. And of course, they called him after his name, but he said, no, that's not right. So he was an evangelist. So now when we hear about the evangelist, that's from the Martin Luther King line that comes down through there.
We know.
Well, anyway, in the year of November 13, 1878, is when Grandma and Grandpa, that would be Gustav and Grandma Zaire joined the church in Oregon, little town that I was able to visit with and see. And because of that, pretty much had persecution, gave up, came to the United States, had a rough go, lost 3 babies, first 3 children, ended up in a homestead out here in Melba. At that time, there was no irrigation of water there yet. It was just a sagebrush area. And then there was a fellow by the name of Eberhard that was coming, and he was a religious type fellow, but he left home when he was 17. His mother was upset because Sonny just disappeared.
In Germany.
In Germany, yeah. And he basically said this: I engaged myself in secret prayer, guide to a good religion, home and people, and left.
That's 17.
At 17 in
Wow.
Germany.
Sounds like Hans Peter Larsen.
Bounced
A little
around
bit.
through some people and played. Worked a little bit where he could and where he couldn't. And sometimes he was out on the street. And then he said, he was staying with a lady, and she said, there's a bulletin down. He went down, looked at the bulletin. There was something about the Mormon missionaries being there, and said, maybe you want to go. So he said, I went and visited. Said almost nobody was there. He said
This is in Germany?
This is in Germany.
Yeah.
So they couldn't speak German very well. He said, I couldn't understand them.
No way.
He said, it was poorly attended. He said, but it was impressed with it. They were working for free, he said. That was the thing that impressed me. They didn't charge anything, and they left some pamphlets around. He ended up reading the Book of Mormon. He said, I got a testimony of the Book of Mormon.
So got me.
And then he learned more about the church. And then he went and found the missionaries again and said, I want to be baptized. So they said, well, you have to learn about the word of wisdom. Oh, didn't know about the word of wisdom, but he said, I think I can live that. Then you got to have the word of tithing. He said, I don't have any money. Can I apply for a variance?
Like 10% of zero?
To not have to pay
Is zero.
any tithing. But he said, I went ahead and I was baptized anyway. And it worked, progressed along, and this Eberhard ended up marrying a woman who was Grandpa Zaire's sister.
Hmm.
Gustav and his mother had already made it over here to the homestead, and they started telling them about it, and they helped them get their papers ready. So that when he married ladies, and they decided that they would come over here, and so they emigrated. And that's kind of where the story really begins in interest. This is from his own thing. I have to get a...
Here, right here.
We arrived at Nampa June 17th, 1912. Now this Eberhard, the son of Eberhard, had been born 3 years earlier in Germany, and he came over as a 3-year-old. And he said, I arrived in 1912. Now we're back about the time my dad was born in 1911.
Yeah. And he was married to his Zaire sister.
And he was married to his Irish sister, right. Mm-hmm. And let's see. We made our home with brother and sister Zaire for some months on a farm south of Nampa that they had homesteaded.
Wow.
Brother and sister Meyer gave us money, 1 heifer, and some chickens.
Zaire, was it Zaire or Meyer?
Zaire.
Zaire.
Oh, Zaire, okay.
Brother Zaire died on August the 20th. Now, he's the one that we had our history.
Typhoid, right?
Got typhoid fever when they drank the ditch water.
Gustav.
That came in. And the story was that he bought family, because the only water they had is if you bought it from a single well, which is in Beaumont, and that well still exists.
And put it in the cistern.
And it was drawn by with a horse-drawn tank. They would buy water. They would dig a hole in the ground, what they called a cistern. They would line it with kind of like a cement thing. When the water got low, they would get them a rag, clean it out. Dad was telling me all this. And they would buy another load of water. And that would be for their bathing, their cooking, their water, everything, because there wasn't any water. It was sagebrush.
They had to buy water.
That's where it was. So the oldest son of Frida Zaire, and that wrote Clarence fell over the cliff on the Snake River where they found him dead. Well, we found later that he had a 22 shot behind his ear. It never was investigated, and that was Grandma Zaire's oldest boy at that point. I don't want to bore you too much. I guess it's very
Just killed
interesting.
for something.
Good.
Could have been an accident.
It said, brothers and sisters are having taken up a homestead, and this is, the neighborhood wrote this, of 140 acres, 20 miles south of Nampa, close to the Snake River. You've been there.
Mm-hmm.
This is the old Zaire farm, okay? They had a house built already themselves, so they built one for us, 12 by 14.
That's smaller than his dining room.
That's half the size of that room. I measured it.
Yeah.
From that wall to the fireplace, and this way 10 feet.
That's the house.
4 people, one house, no water,
No bathroom.
sewer, no bathroom. That's where they started.
In a winter like
It
this.
says a very small house
Oh my gosh.
for a family of 4.
It was pretty cool. They gave him a cow though, because a cow would be like giving someone
Huge.
a
Big
car. Now,
time,
like,
but that's
here,
where
have
you
my
get
extra
cow,
car.
and chickens, and some money.
Right, that'd be
Heifer?
So, I mean, they basically, Grandpa Adolf just basically helped them out.
Yep.
And then he died.
So that's your mom's dad.
Yes,
Is that right? Okay.
Gustav.
Gustav. And when he died, Mother was about a 1-year-old.
And wasn't he 38 or
And
42 or
Jean
something when
hadn't
he
been
died?
born yet. She was about 6 months in the womb when he died. And shortly after that, Clarence was found dead.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this. Melba's up on a rim, and if you drive down around, they actually have a national thing down there where a lot of hieroglyphics are, where the old Indians used to live through the summertime.
Down by the river, right?
Yeah.
Celebration Park.
And Uncle Tad used to, he had together that wagon and a stagecoach and thing, and they would stage a robbery for the scouts. If they were night down and they come down, they shoot off their pistols and have a good time. He always had fun. Uncle Tad loved to have fun with people. But this area is semi-desert. At that time, it was desolate beyond imagination. There were no jobs, and my father had no skills in farming.
And they came from Germany. That was
And they
green
came from
and
Germany,
beautiful.
and he said
To this desolate
we
spot.
sold everything to come. They said we sold our furniture, bed. He said we had nothing.
Think about Germany and Austria, how beautiful it is, and you come to this desert.
Well, he worked all over for Johns, and finally, the Swan Falls Dam, which was, he got a job there working up there in that for just a little while.
How far is that? Is that a long ways away?
Pretty good walk. And he carried his sleeping bag on his back and walked 20 miles to really find a job to work. All right. Our drinking water came from the Snake River. We hauled and kept it in a wooden barrel. It was green with algae and smelled like fish. In a few days, it would also be full of red wigglers. I found out there was kind of a little tiny worm.
Protein.
Yeah.
Protein, that's old protein. drink.
And that's their water.
We skimmed the algae off and drank it until the red wigglers became too numerous and the water was so putrid that even boiling would not make it drinkable. We gave the animals what they would drink and poured the rest on the garden they were trying to grow. For years, our crops were virtual failures. Our ditches were regularly riddled with gophers. The gopher caused the ditches, and the water finally started to come in. They got it out there. And they cleared the sagebrush one piece at a time with a grubbing hoe. Now, my dad told me they railed it. He came later. They bought their farm that they had there. It was a few months. So they didn't have the original homestead. But by railing, they would take a piece of railroad iron from the tracks, tie a horse on each end of it, and they would drag this across the sagebrush multiple times, and then knock
Rip
it down.
some of it out, knock it
Knock
down.
it down, then they go back with a grubbing hoe and get it down. And that sagebrush they used for everything, the heating that they could to live with, basically. That was a Christmas tree to have a sagebrush in those days. One of the greatest difficulties was the fierce spring wind. As the protective sagebrush cover was removed, the winds blew the silicon lava sand around. These sandstorms lasted for days. Visibility was down to 11 feet, and once out of sight, people could not be found. People had to wear damp clothes over their noses and mouths for days. When they abated, there would be several inches of sand on the floor of our one-room shack.
Inside.
My mother covered our meager food supply with quilts to keep the food edible, but somehow some of the sand always sifted through. But we had to eat it no matter how bad it tasted. One of the vivid memories of my childhood was a band of coyotes which roamed the fields and tried to steal the few chickens we could raise. They even tried to kill newborn calves. I remember how one large coyote followed my mother from the field as she drove our cow and a newborn calf up to the house. She had to jab at the coyote constantly with her pitchfork every few steps to keep it away.
Oh my gosh.
Afterward, it sat near the house for some time and refused to go away. Rattlesnakes were everywhere. My father would grub out the sagebrush on weekends when he came home from his work and put it in a large pile, which our mother burned during the week. Because the natural habitat had been destroyed, the rattlesnakes would gather in the brush piles. Sometimes as many as 10 rattlers would come out of these brush piles when they were burned. My mother tried to kill as many as she could with her fork and her shovel, and occasionally the snakes would try to crawl up the handle. There was nothing to do but drop the shovel and run.
Oh my gosh.
We would cling to her skirts in horror. When I started grade school, it was during the time of World War I. I've been to this little grade school, no longer anymore, it was hauled off, he said. We had arrived rather recently from Germany. My parents could not speak English. They were not United States citizens. The propaganda against Germany was intense, in some respects not factual. Added to this was the fact that we were Mormons, which constitute about 1% of the population. A more unpopular background would be hard to imagine. Coming home from school, we were regularly beaten, scratched, tripped, dragged, or verbally assaulted. We crawled into ditches or ran into fields in an attempt to keep from being maltreated.
Wow.
That's the beginning you had out there when they had that. It's just interesting how rough it could be. But they cleared that. And my understanding was if you got a homestead and you could clear the sagebrush and farm it for 2 years, it was yours. And they didn't have any money. They were just existing what they could haul. Now to bring it up from the river, they had to take a pretty good trip down to the river.
I don't think I've been to the river from Tad's house. Have you ever been down to the river from Tad's?
Haven't you?
I mean, it was a drive on the road, though.
It's a drive on a road.
It was a drive on a road. It wasn't like
and
walking.
They go down with
Is it a canyon there, or is it
Yeah.
open?
Oh, yeah,
Snake River
for the
Canyon.
big Snake River comes through, they go
I
right
know,
down.
but it's like some places a snake like Burley is just open.
Oh, no, it's a big deep canyon. It's a big deep canyon. Oh, yeah. In fact, if you go out there on so it's our farm, we got a little south, a little bit further, it drops straight off. We used to have one road that would go down through the Tad, would take us down, and then we'd load up a whole bunch of rocks and put in his pickup because we couldn't get back up.
To get up.
And now it's closed. They didn't allow anybody to even try anymore. It's just too dangerous.
But there's access.
Rattlesnakes. You have to go around down to where the Guppy Bridge is, and there's a road that comes into the what do they call that place where all the hieroglyphics are? The
Celebration Park.
Celebration Park, they now call it. It's actually a national celebration
Oh,
park.
we should go look at that.
And you can't drive into that. It's not that area anymore. You have to hike into it because you still see the hieroglyphics and the things like that. But anyway, that's what they started with.
This is all from the Eberhards, right? So it's
This is Brother Everhard.
Who wrote this?
This is his father. He wrote part of it.
so he's
before he
basically
died.
Gustav's brother-in-law.
This is
Or
and
Edith's
then the young Everhard
Or
was
Edith's uncle.
3 when
Yeah.
his parents left Germany, and he lived here.
Wow.
He eventually grew up, moved to Preston, had a family, and then eventually he was involved in the church quite a bit. He ended up being in Preston and being a bishop and helping a lot of people, things like that, farming. And then he went. Then he got into the Depression. No money available. They said, "Why don't you go to school?" And he said, "I don't have any money to go to school." And so the German friend, they said, "Well, why don't you take the German test?" Somewhere I've written. Oh, he took it just out of turn. He took a German test from what he learned on his own, I guess. 274 of 276 correct, right answer. So they hired him on the spot
To be a German teacher.
to be a German teacher.
At BYU.
Right.
Really?
BYU.
Wow.
And that's,
And he progressed on up through to the point that he was head of all of the seminary curriculum.
Hmm.
And was given a Doctorate of Humanities from BYU
in the 70s.
in the 70s.
Without ever going to school, right?
Without ever going to school.
Oh, that's amazing.
And
But his start was way back there, and his
And being
his
persecuted
grandfather
as a
joined
German
the church
Mormon
just on what he was doing. But anyway,
during the war.
I'd be interested to know a little bit about some of the history that.
Well, where did you get that? Was that from
This is a book. Somebody put this book together.
Among Our Roots and Branches, Eberhards?
and it's Reed gave it to
Read it to me.
Daddy.
There's about, and it takes about 6 or 7 different Eberhard families that follows through. I only read Ernie's.
Well, that's the closest connection to us, right? To Desires.
We knew Ernie, and our family knew Ernie. Obviously, he grew up with Uncle
So he was
Tad.
Edith's uncle, so he was kind of like your grand uncle.
Uncle Tad was my uncle, but he was a second
Granduncle.
grandson.
Great-uncle.
I didn't see him near as much as I did Uncle Tad.
But you knew that man.
Yeah.
You knew this
I
man.
just knew he was all. He was.
And he
devoted.
was the mission president in Boise, Idaho mission in the 70s.
That's
Oh.
right. He mission president and became very educated. And I mean, he literally wrote all of the Sunday school curriculum. He was in charge of it for years, and the seminary.
That's amazing.
And so Tyler's father was the oldest
Irv is
child.
Irv, right? Is it Irv?
Irv was the oldest child after Clarence was killed. It was Uncle Irv.
Uncle Irv was? Okay.
Yes, everybody. Well, Aunt Vi was. I think Aunt Vi was oldest,
Mm-hmm.
and then came
He
Irv,
was oldest boy.
and then came Tad, and
Where's Con?
Then Edith.
Oh, Con is Tad's son.
and then Edith, and then Aunt Jean. But we know her as Aunt Jean,
So see, this all ties into
But Aunt Jean was in the womb when Gustav died,
Yeah.
right?
right?
And then
3
did
months
her
pregnant.
mother, your grandmother, she remarried, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't have any more children together.
They were married. It was years later, though, right?
This is my mother's side. Dad, he wasn't a member of the church.
Right. And they homesteaded there in the flatter part.
They didn't do the original homestead. They bought those farms from that originally had leased and made it a farm.
I remember we went out there and saw the old barn.
Yeah.
I went by the other day, and actually I knocked on the door, and they let me. It's been added on to twice. The old, and somewhere in that, I've got a video of that. Dad took me before.
Yeah, he walked around. You have a video of him walking around saying, "This is where the barn was."
This is where the cistern was. This is where the chickens were. This is where they built the farm. Now it was just they put a new roof on it, so you read it or see it now. But anyway, maybe as you get it, you might like to know a little.
That's awesome.
But otherwise, you probably wouldn't hear anything about it. But you had some real pioneers in our family. That I mean, they had a rough go.
They sacrificed to the church.
And just think, for drinking water was just not.
Yeah,
that's valid.
The red wigglers.
Red winklers. Yeah. And it got bad enough. You get the horse up, go down to the wooden barrel, and get another load of wood water, and come back. That's what you do until it got so bad you couldn't take it anymore. You dump it on the ground and go back and get another.
Get more algae, red wiggler water.
Full of water.
And then both of the sisters, the Papa's grandmother and her sister that was married to this Eberhard,
What's wrong with these apple?
they all said
I'm okay. Thank you.
if we 5 years after we got here, if we would have had the money, we would have gone back home
Yeah. See, there was
because it was so depressing.
After 5 years.
Well,
Yeah,
they
after
thought they
5
made a
years.
mistake, but the war started and they couldn't get it. We couldn't go back.
But they didn't have enough money to go back anyway.
Big guy eating them.
Glad they didn't go back. I'd be speaking German. Maybe.
Our lives would be a lot different, wouldn't they?
But I said, Mother, why didn't you ever learn German? She was, we didn't want them to know we were Germans. There's no way we wanted them to know we were Germans.
Because they
We
were
were at war with
fighting.
Germany.
Yeah.
The only thing she learned was the slang words from Grandma. I mean, she'd be upset at them.
So Mom didn't know German?
No.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
But then how neat you were called to learn German on your mission? And Lance.
Yeah, and Lance, and then Reed.
Yeah,
did
and Reed
it
too.
Has Germany ever come out with any official